Hey there, sleepyheads, and welcome back to our quiet corner of history. As the world outside slows its pace, let your mind gently drift, allowing the whispers of the past to carry you away to ancient lands and forgotten rhythms. If this calm exploration of history brings you a moment of peace and intrigue, perhaps a gentle tap on the follow button and a quiet share of your thoughts in the comments below, letting us know where you're listening from would be a wonderful way to connect. Tonight we're embarking on a fascinating journey to a civilization where the pursuit of altered states wasn't just tolerated, but deeply woven into the very fabric of existence, from daily sustenance to profound spiritual quests. So dim the lights, perhaps turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together deep into the heart of ancient Egypt. You find yourself in the sun-baked land of ancient Egypt, a civilization not merely of pyramids and pharaohs, but of an intricate social ballet where the boundaries between the mundane and the divine were remarkably fluid. Here, altered mental states weren't just a fleeting indulgence. They were a profound, often celebrated aspect of your religious and social life. Imagine the expectation, the sheer cultural imperative for you to not just observe, but to fully surrender to experiences designed to shift your consciousness. It's almost as if you're expected to engage in a high-stakes theatrical inner monologue, perceived as a direct channel to the gods themselves. This wasn't some fringe activity tucked away in dimly lit corners. It was a social norm integrated and encouraged, with an unspoken understanding that your engagement was a testament to your piety and your connection to the wider community. You'd quickly learn that to hold back to remain entirely sober and detached might invite quiet suspicion, a subtle but palpable sense of being outside the current of shared experience. Picture yourself then amidst the public revelry of festivals like the famous Feast of Drunkenness. This wasn't a quiet contemplation, it was a vibrant, often chaotic communal communion. The air would thicken with the rhythmic clapping, the insistent thrum of raucous music, and the pervasive sweet-sour scent of fermenting brews. You'd feel the press of swaying crowds around you, a palpable energy that builds and builds. You're handed a thick spiced beer, not unlike a liquid bread, and you drink deeply, feeling the warmth spread through you. Here inhibitions dissolved like sand in the Nile, fostering a powerful sense of unity. It was a sanctioned venue for collective spiritual elevation, a time when the individual merged into the collective, seeking a shared, often disoriented path to the divine. The sound of tambourines, the shouts of joyous participants, the aroma of the fermenting drinks, and the sheer physical sensation of being part of this swirling mass would be overwhelming yet strangely comforting. In these sacred spaces you'd observe the priests and priestesses, highly trained conduits for the divine. They were the hosts welcoming gods into their very beings, like Airbnb guests, as it were. You'd watch them undergo dramatic shifts in voice and posture, their eyes often fixed on the flickering flames of a brazier. Cryptic prophecies thought to be direct messages from the gods would then be announced, transforming the act of trance into a structured form of public communication. The air in these temple chambers would be heavy, sweet, and thick with the scent of Kyphi smoke, a potent, complex incense designed to aid in this very transformation. You might feel a slight lightheadedness yourself just from breathing the sacred air, a subtle suggestion of the power being invoked. Even the art around you subtly communicated the sacred nature of these experiences. Take the blue lotus, for instance. You'd see it frequently depicted in tomb paintings, pharaohs, banquet guests, even common folk in some contexts, delicately sniffing its elegant petals. This wasn't just aesthetic appreciation. It was a visual shorthand, a symbolic language communicating the flower's sacred properties, its deep association with rebirth and the sun god Ra, and the profound act of inhaling divinity. It created a rich visual lexicon of spiritual connection that permeated elite art, suggesting that these practices were not only accepted, but held a prominent place in the elite's spiritual aspirations. This subtle, artistic communication would reinforce the cultural significance of these substances in your daily life. Beyond the mere symbolic artistry you've observed, the blue lotus blossomed into something truly central to your spiritual life, a tangible gateway to the divine. Imagine this for days. You might carefully soak dried blue lotus petals in wine, allowing its delicate essence to infuse the liquid. When consumed, this lotus-infused wine wouldn't hit you with a jarring jolt. Instead, it would induce a soft, dreamy euphoria, a gentle, almost floaty sensation that would ease you into communion with the gods. It was particularly favoured for connecting with Ra, the mighty sun god, and was deemed perfect for the solemnity of temple rites and the profound quiet of funerary ceremonies. The taste itself, you'd find, offered a direct pathway to the divine, inducing a sense of serene elevation that felt less like an escape and more like a gentle lifting of the veil between worlds. It was a subtle, yet powerful experience designed for contemplation, not chaos. Contrast that gentle euphoria with the sheer unapologetic obliteration mandated by the Feast of Drunkenness. This annual celebration, a cosmic reenactment commemorating the pacification of the furious goddess Hathor, was no mere party. It literally commanded you to drink as much as your heart desires until you achieved a divine trance. And what precisely did that often entail? Well, it frequently meant you'd find yourself collapsed quite unceremoniously, face first into a courtyard. This wasn't a social faux pas. It was the intended outcome, embodying a profound cultural commitment to theological reenactment and communal spiritual renewal. It was a collective letting go of inhibitions, a societal agreement to shed the constraints of daily life and fully embrace the chaos of divine experience. You might wake up with a pounding head, yes, but you'd also carry the quiet satisfaction of having fulfilled a sacred duty, having truly participated in the cosmic dance. Then there was Kyphi, not just an incense, but what you might call a spiritual elevator. This wasn't your everyday air freshener. Kyphi was a complex fermentable incense, a meticulous blend of myrrh, honey wine, and various spices carefully prepared and burned slowly. You'd find yourself in an unventilated temple chamber during ritual purification, the air growing thick, heavy, and sweet with its fragrant smoke. As the tendrils of smoke filled the space, your senses would become overwhelmed. You'd feel your lungs taking in the dense aromatic vapour, and soon an inevitable lightheadedness would creep in. For many, this led to powerful, often vivid visions, a profound sense of deep spirituality that seemed to permeate your very being. Or at the very least, you'd experience a significant sense of disoriented uplifting your mind, floating detached from the physical world. The scent alone was enough to signify that something sacred, something potent was taking place. Beyond the well-known blue lotus and the celebratory beer, other potent plants played their role. Mandrake, for instance, with its famously forked roots, was treated with both reverence and caution. You'd know of its potent alkaloids, scopolamine and atropine, and its careful incorporation into temple recipes and rituals. It was employed to induce sleep, to ease pain, and even to inspire sensual poetry. Yet you'd also understand the inherent terrifying risk. A misjudged dosage could lead to intense hallucinations, or even more chillingly cardiac arrest. The bitter-rooty aftertaste of any mandrake-infused preparation would serve as an immediate signal that you were engaging with something serious, something profoundly powerful and potentially dangerous, a true instrument of ritual demanding respect and expert handling. Having absorbed the nuances of ritualistic plants, you'd also understand that for the spiritual elite, cannabis represented a tool of profound focus. You might envision its use by priests not for casual pain relief, though it served that purpose too, but in deeply focused rituals. Often combined with the pervasive fragrant smoke of other incenses, cannabis was utilized specifically to facilitate communication with the gods, or as some texts imply, to confront the wall. This suggests its role was far from recreational. For these dedicated individuals, it was a concentrated instrument for profound spiritual insight, an aid in the complex art of dream interpretation, and a pathway for accessing divine wisdom during prolonged trance. You'd observe their unwavering concentration, their eyes unfocused yet intensely inward, as they pursued a deliberate path to enlightenment, not casual indulgence. This was the demanding sacred labour of the mind enhanced by potent plant allies. And then there was wine, a beverage that for you and your fellow Egyptians transcended its role as a mere drink. When infused with other psychoactive elements like mandrake or the ever-present blue lotus wine, became something far more profound, a vehicle for achieving metaphysical disconnection at religious festivals. Imagine the warm rush of the spiked wine not just a physical sensation, but a direct liquid pathway to altered perception. It blurred the lines between earthly pleasure and spiritual enlightenment, allowing participants to teeter between dimensions. One moment you might be feeling the mud of the courtyard beneath your sandals, the next a sensation of floating your mind reaching for higher planes. This wasn't merely about getting drunk. It was about willingly stepping into a liminal space guided by a concoction that promised a glimpse of the divine. The profound cultural commitment to these altered states didn't end with life or even with death. Consider the meticulous entombed provisions found with mummies. You'd see not just practical tools but also blue lotus petals, wine jugs, incense cones, and even detailed instructions for their use. This wasn't simply a hopeful gesture. It demonstrated a deep unwavering belief in the continuation of spiritual practices and the need for altered states even in the afterlife. It was a way to ensure the soul's ongoing journey was well equipped, not just with necessities, but with pleasures and pathways to the divine. You'd be sent off with a complete spiritual travel kit, because why should your connection to the gods diminish just because your heart has stopped beating? This journey into the afterlife was further reinforced by specific rituals, most notably the opening of the mouth ceremony for the deceased. You'd observe this ritual knowing its immense significance. It was believed to ritually enable the departed to eat, speak, and crucially to sip that sacred fermented beverage with proper technique. This wasn't a symbolic act alone. It ensured their full participation in the spiritual provisions of the tomb, an active communion with Osiris, Lord of the Underworld. It was a powerful declaration that death did not mean cessation, but rather a transition where the limitations of the physical body were removed, and the spiritual journey enhanced by familiar and cherished substances could continue unimpeded. These practices highlight a culture where the journey into the divine was a continuum, life and death merely different phases of an ongoing, often intoxicating experience. The Blue Lotus, which you now understand as a vessel for ritual, held an even deeper cosmological significance within your spiritual framework. It was intrinsically linked to Ra, the mighty sun god, and thus to the very concepts of cyclical rebirth and creation itself. Imagine witnessing the lotus flower's daily ritual, unfurling its elegant petals with the first rays of dawn, only to fold them again as dusk descends. This natural rhythm mirrored the sun's own journey across the sky and its nightly descent into the underworld, only to be reborn anew each morning. For you, the symbolic act of inhaling divinity by sniffing or consuming the lotus wasn't just a personal experience. It was a profound connection to this cosmic order, a tangible participation in the universe's unending cycle of renewal. It was a plant that literally embodied hope, a constant, gentle reminder that even after darkness light would return, and life in its many forms would find its way back. This power of ritualistic intoxication to appease deities wasn't just a belief, it was enshrined in foundational myths. You'd certainly know the story of Hathor's pacification, a core narrative for understanding divine balance and averting disaster. The myth recounts a time when the goddess Hathor in her wrathful form as Sekhmet threatened to annihilate humanity. To stop her, vast quantities of red beer dyed to resemble blood were poured across the land. Hathor, mistaking it for human blood, drank until she was thoroughly intoxicated, her fury dissolving into a peaceful slumber. The annual Feast of Drunkenness, which you might have already experienced, was a direct commemoration of this myth. It underscored a profound belief in the power of ritualistic intoxication to influence the divine, turning divine wrath into divine tranquility. For you, getting obliterated during this festival wasn't just fun. It was a sacred duty, a reenactment that ensured the continued balance of the cosmos. Kyphi. The complex incense you've encountered was far more than just a sweet aroma. It was viewed as a truly holistic spiritual tool, seamlessly blending the practical with the profound. You'd burn it not only as a ritual air freshener purifying the temple chambers and your own home, but also recognize its medicinal properties. Some believed it effective for snake bites, others for improving sleep, weaving health and spirituality together. It was a perfume for the gods, and for yourself a sensory adornment. More subtly, its drifting aroma carried by the gentle Nile breezes signalled holy events across the land, acting like a sacred fog machine, whose scent alone prepared the heart for devotion. This deep reverence for the olfactory sense meant that smell was a direct pathway to the divine, as important as sight or sound in your spiritual life. You might find yourself taking a deep breath, letting the sacred smoke fill your lungs, feeling its soothing, elevating effect. Then there was the mandrake, a plant shrouded in a terrifying folkloric power that went far beyond its medicinal or psychoactive effects. You'd certainly be familiar with the deeply ingrained folk belief that its extraction from the earth caused lethal screams, sounds so potent they could kill a human. This legend, likely born from its uncanny human-like forked roots, and its powerful effects on the mind, reflected a pervasive superstition about nature's mystical and dangerous forces. You'd treat the mandrake with a cautious reverence, akin to how you might approach wild, unpredictable animals, or even a pharaoh in a particularly bad mood. It instilled a sense of awe and a healthy dose of fear, reminding you that the natural world held powers both benevolent and terrifying, and that even a plant could possess a formidable, almost sentient spiritual essence. This blend of practical application and chilling superstition shaped your interaction with such potent herbs. You've explored the cosmic dances and potent plants, but these grand spiritual frameworks also manifested in deeply personal, familial ways. Consider, for instance, the annual beautiful Feast of the Valley. This wasn't a somber ritual. It was a vibrant, heartfelt celebration that blurred the line between the living and the dead. You and your family would prepare meticulously, lugging baskets heavy with food and jugs brimming with beer, the very stuff you'd rely on daily, to the tombs of your beloved ancestors. Imagine the scene, a quiet procession, the sun warm on your back, the dust settling on your sandals as you approach the necropolis. Once there, you wouldn't just pay respects, you'd share a meal. You'd sit amidst the silent stone, perhaps hoping Grandma appreciated the pickled fish. You brought a quiet, almost domestic intimacy in the face of eternity. This practice powerfully exemplified your belief in a porous boundary between life and death, reinforcing continuous spiritual and familial connections, and offering a tangible comfort that eased the sharp edges of grief and loss. It was a profound human way to keep the family together, even across the ultimate divide. And sometimes your connection to the departed or even to the divine required a more direct yet ethereal path. This led to the fascinating practice of sleeping overnight in tombs. You might venture into the cool, silent chambers, perhaps after a day of feasting and offerings, to lie down among the very resting places of your ancestors. The goal, to invite dream visions. You'd hope for guidance from departed loved ones, perhaps a father, a mother, or even in a slightly more amusing twist, some unsolicited advice from a former accountant turned ghost. Practical wisdom from those who had crossed over. This practice underscored a strong cultural belief in dreams as direct conduits for spiritual or ancestral communication. In the profound silence and darkness of the tomb, with your mind open and expectant, You sought comfort, direction, or simply a sign that the ties of family and spirit remained unbroken. It was a unique form of therapy, a way to gain counsel from the quiet wisdom of the beyond, a blend of hope and a touch of the everyday practicality, even in the spiritual realm. This entire approach to the afterlife, these rituals and practices, stem from a unique philosophical stance. You hold pleasure and piety are not separate entities. In your world, they are deeply, seamlessly intertwined. If a psychoactive flower carefully soaked in wine could bring you closer to the gods in life, inducing a gentle introspective euphoria or a profound vision, then why, you might ask, should it not do the same in death? For you, it made perfect sense. The same blue lotus petals, the same jugs of potent wine, the same aromatic incense that enhanced your spiritual devotion while living were deemed equally appropriate, indeed necessary, for your tomb. It's a holistic approach to spiritual fulfillment, emphasizing that sensory experience and divine connection are not in opposition but are in fact complementary. Your journey through existence, from the first breath to the last and beyond, is seen as a continuous tapestry where every thread, every sensation, every altered state can lead you closer to the divine. This deep integration means that even the everyday tangible realities of your life are imbued with spiritual significance, guiding you through harsh environmental conditions and the often grueling demands of daily existence. Having considered how pleasure and piety found common ground, let's now anchor your consciousness firmly back in the often unforgiving realities of ancient Egyptian daily life. These weren't abstract spiritual concepts you were dealing with. These were the tangible, gritty details of existence. Imagine the pervasive presence of 120-degree heat with limited plumbing and an unpredictable crocodile problem. You'd feel the relentless sun beating down on your skin day in and day out, the air thick and unmoving. Clean, safe water was a constant worry, making the Nile a source of life but also a potential bearer of disease. And then there were the crocodiles, an ever-present terrifying threat that made even a simple trip to the riverbank a high-stakes gamble. This demanding daily environment, riddled with constant physical and mental discomfort, created an undeniable, almost primal need for respite. It's no wonder then that readily available substances like beer and milder intoxicants became a necessary escape. They weren't just for rituals. They were a form of routine self-medication, a way for you to cope with the sheer unrelenting stress of simply existing in such a harsh world. A mild buzz, a gentle float, a moment of oblivion. These were not luxuries but tools for survival in a land that demanded much. When you participated in those spiritual practices, we discussed the environment itself intensified the experience. Picture yourself standing in a limestone cube next to a sweating priest waving a smoking dish of Kyphi. The air, already warm, would quickly become dense and heavy in the unventilated chamber. You'd feel the sweat trickling down your back, clinging to your linen clothing. The limestone walls, ancient and unyielding, seemed to absorb the heat, and the potent, sweet smoke amplifying its effects. The close proximity to other bodies also sweating and swaying would create a claustrophobic yet powerfully communal atmosphere. The potent effects of the Kyphi incense, already designed to elevate your spirit, were undeniably enhanced by these physical conditions. You'd find yourself disoriented, perhaps light-headed, your mind already primed for visions by the sheer intensity of your surroundings. This wasn't a sterile, controlled environment. It was a visceral, immersive experience where your body, your senses, and the very air you breathed all conspired to lift you out of your ordinary reality for better or for worse. The world outside the temple walls, however, presented its own set of sensory challenges, often less transcendent and more mundane. You've experienced the potent, almost suffocating atmosphere of a temple ritual. But now consider the wider social context of these altered states, particularly during the boisterous festivals. The public and often chaotic nature of these events meant a general lack of personal privacy, a concept you might take for granted in your modern world. Imagine the scene: people collapsing face first into a mud brick courtyard surrounded by strangers yelling praises between hiccups. There was no shame, no hushed judgment in these moments of profound vulnerability. Instead, there was a communal acceptance, a shared understanding that this physical surrender was part of the divine experience. Personal boundaries blurred, and the lines between individual dignity and collective, often undignified revelry, dissolved. You wouldn't be surprised to see your neighbour, your friend, or even a stranger in such a state, knowing that you too might soon find yourself there. It was a testament to the powerful social glue of these shared intense experiences, where humility in the face of the divine was paramount, even if it meant a temporary loss of composure. This profound concern for comfort and sustenance stretching beyond terrestrial life was perhaps most poignantly demonstrated in the construction of your eternal dwelling, the tomb. These weren't just burial sites, they were carefully curated starter homes for the soul. You or your family would meticulously furnish them not just with precious grave goods, but with surprisingly practical items. Think of the essentials food jugs of booze, often the very same beer and wine you consume daily, and carefully arranged mood-enhancing herbal mixtures. This wasn't just symbolic. It reflected a continuous, deeply ingrained concern for your well-being and pleasure in the afterlife. Your earthly desires, your need for comfort and sustenance, were projected onto eternity. You wanted your soul to be well-fed, well-hydrated, and well-equipped to achieve altered states even in the realm of the dead. It was an ultimate expression of preparation, a testament to the belief that your journey continued, and that you deserved all the comforts of home no matter where your soul might wander. You might even find yourself contemplating which vintage of lotus wine you'd want to take with you. Yet returning to the earthly realm the morning after one of these widespread communal intoxications brought a rather undignified yet shared reality. You'd often find yourself waking up with a sense of disorientation, perhaps, with the faint scent of lotus still clinging to your hair, and perhaps a subtle imprint on your face from a less than graceful collapse. This wasn't an exclusive experience for the elite. It transcended social class. The high priest, the artisan, the farmer, all might share this tangible physical aftermath. You'd feel the dry grit in your mouth, the ache behind your eyes, the stiffness in your limbs. The petals in your hair, once symbols of divine connection, were now merely a messy reminder of your surrender. The sandal imprints. Well, that was just proof of a very enthusiastic, if somewhat clumsy, participation. It was a common, universal experience that bonded everyone, a collective hangover that united the population in their recovery. And as you slowly sat up, dusting yourself off, you'd begin to think about what the day would hold, often beginning with the most basic necessity of all, your next meal. You've witnessed the communal chaos and the shared morning after. But before you even got to that state, the foundations of your daily sustenance were already deeply intertwined with a particular intoxicating staple. Ancient Egyptian beer, for instance, bore little resemblance to the clear, bubbly lagers you might know today. Imagine a thick, opaque substance often described as resembling soupy oatmeal, or even liquid bread made from partially baked loaves of emmer bread. It was fermented until it reached a chewable consistency, its murky appearance a defining feature. This wasn't just a drink. It was a fundamental source of calories and hydration consumed by everyone from the lowest peasant to the highest priest, by children and scribes alike. The coarse, chewable texture and its cloudiness were defining features, a unique sensory experience that transcended social barriers. You'd find yourself chewing your way through your daily ration, feeling its grainy substance between your teeth, a sensation far removed from modern drinking, almost like a meal in itself. The nature of this daily brew also speaks to a deeper truth about your diet, its monotony and scarcity. This liquid bread was calorically dense, mildly intoxicating, and cheaper than anything else that didn't require chasing it down with a spear. Think about that for a moment. For many, this thick, fermenting beverage wasn't a choice for pleasure, but a primary source of calories, a necessary means of survival. Your diet, for the vast majority of the population, was frequently dictated by basic affordability and the sheer effort required to secure food. This highlights the often monotonous nature of food options for many, where beer provided a welcome albeit subtle relief from the gnawing pangs of hunger. It filled your stomach, gave you a little warmth, and took the edge off the relentless grind of daily life. It was a pragmatic solution to a constant problem, a foundational element of your caloric intake that just happened to come with a mild, comforting buzz. Perhaps one of beer's most vital yet often overlooked roles was in food preservation and safety. In a world utterly devoid of modern sanitation, the Nile, while being the lifeblood of Egypt, also posed significant health risks. Its waters, teeming with unseen dangers, could easily lead to illness or worse. But your beer? It was boiled during its preparation, then fermented and often spiced, making it considerably safer than the Nile water. This positioned beer in a crucial light. It wasn't just sustenance, it was a more reliable and hygienic source of hydration. You chose it daily not just for the calories or the mild buzz, but because it was the safer bet. This functional aspect elevated beer from a simple beverage to a critical daily choice for survival, a testament to your ingenuity in adapting to your environment. The mild intoxication, then, was an added bonus to a necessity, a small comfort in a world where basic safety was a daily challenge. However, access to dietary pleasures, especially intoxicating ones, was starkly class-based. While commoners like you often relied on that basic barley beer and rudimentary sustenance, the elite lived a different reality. They enjoyed blue lotus oil and sipping spiked pomegranate wine out of gold-rimmed chalices. Imagine the vibrant colour of the pomegranate wine infused with something truly potent served in gleaming metal, a stark contrast to your chunky beer. This clear delineation of access based on wealth and social status extended even to the quality of their intoxicants. The rich could truly get higher, in a literal sense, affording the rare and expensive elements that commoners could only dream of. This wasn't just about food. It was about power, prestige, and the exclusive right to experience certain states of consciousness, reinforcing the social strata in every sip. You've now gained a deeper appreciation for the multifaceted role of beer in your daily life. But the intentional alteration of beverages didn't stop there. Beer and wine, those everyday staples, were frequently intentionally altered with herbs, spices, and other curious additives like mandrake or fermented date juice. This wasn't just about enhancing flavour, though that was certainly a bonus. It transformed your daily drinks into versatile remedies for various ailments or tools for spiritual connection. Imagine feeling a dull ache or a recurring discomfort. Your daily beer might then become your medicine infused with something to ease the pain. Or perhaps before a minor ritual at home, your wine would be spiked to aid in contemplation. This blending of sustenance with therapeutic and psychoactive properties meant that almost every sip could serve a dual purpose, nourishing your body while subtly influencing your mind or healing your ailments. It spoke volumes about your practical approach to the world, where the same liquid that quenched your thirst could also minister to your spirit and body. And speaking of that distinctive Egyptian brew, its vivid description as cloudy, chunky, and distressingly chewable isn't an exaggeration. Think about the sensory experience. You'd probably consume it using straws with filters to catch the bigger bread chunks, a practical adaptation to its unique texture. This paints a very clear picture of its physical form and the sheer practicality required for its daily consumption across all segments of society. It was a taste and mouthfeel profoundly different from any modern beverage you might conceive, demanding what could only be described as a national commitment to ignoring mouthfeel. You wouldn't think twice about the bits and pieces. It was simply how beer was. This detail underscores the fundamental differences in daily life, where basic sustenance often came with unique, sometimes challenging sensory experiences that you simply adapted to. It was part of the rhythm, part of the taste of life in ancient Egypt, a constant, slightly chewy, and mildly intoxicating companion. Now, as you digest the details of your diet, let's pivot to the equally fundamental aspect of hygiene and personal care, especially after those intense periods of revelry. The morning after excessive celebrations, particularly the Feast of Drunkenness, often necessitated a ritual cleansing. This wasn't just about rinsing off, it involved a priest and a bucket of cold Nile water. Imagine the shock of that cold water hitting your still muddled head and body. It served as a rudimentary, yet socially sanctioned method of physical recovery. But it was also a symbolic purification, a way to wash away the excesses and restore a sense of balance after states of extreme indulgence. The discomfort of the cold water was an unpleasant but necessary ritual, not just for your body but for your spirit, marking a return from the liminal state of divine trance back to the more ordered reality of daily life. For common revelers, the morning after often brought less structured, more rudimentary self-care. You'd frequently wake up disoriented, very sweaty, after the intense disinhibited trance states, and you might discover a few stray lotus petals still in your hair, or perhaps a faint imprint of a sandal somewhere on your person, remnants of the previous night's joyous surrender. This indicated a simple truth: personal care during and immediately after such intense experiences was minimal at best. The priority was the spiritual journey, the communal experience, the surrender to the divine. The aesthetic presentation of the self could wait. You might feel sticky, dishevelled, and far from pristine, but that was a small price to pay for the spiritual communion you just experienced. It was a shared reality, a quiet understanding that physical appearance momentarily took a backseat to the profound inner journey. Following those hazy mornings of petals and sandal imprints, a more robust, if unpleasant, recovery method was also widely accepted: physical purging. You'd likely be familiar with the common use of emetics, described quite frankly as lovely concoctions designed to evacuate your sins from both ends. While certainly crude, this was an accepted method of physical detoxification and recovery from overindulgence, whether from food or drink. The goal, you'd understand, was to restore balance to your body after the intense revelry. It was a harsh, undeniable process, far from comfortable, but seen as a necessary reset, a way to cleanse the body and prepare it for the next cycle of work and life. You might groan through the process, but you'd also recognise its practical necessity, a somewhat brutal but effective method for getting your body back to a state of equilibrium. Amidst all these physical realities, a subtle, pervasive sensory element permeated your daily life: the aroma of Kyphi incense. It wasn't solely confined to the hallowed halls of temples. Its aroma drifted across the Nile like a sacred fog machine. Imagine the air around you, subtly, constantly scented with its heavy sweet notes. This suggested a pervasive olfactory backdrop to both the sacred and the profane. It wasn't just for rituals. It served a practical purpose too, masking the less pleasant odours that were an unavoidable part of ancient life, from unwashed bodies to animal waste to the ever-present dust. But more than that, it created an omnipresent comfort, a subtle, constant reminder of divine presence. You might take a deep breath, recognising the familiar scent, feeling a quiet sense of peace, or simply associating it with the rhythm of holy events, a constant fragrant thread in the tapestry of your sensory experience. However, not everyone experienced the physical aftermath of revelry equally. Due to their social standing and access to resources, priests often fared better after celebrations. While you might be left to navigate the physical aftermath largely unassisted, a priest would frequently have people to carry them home. This stark contrast highlights the class distinctions that permeated every aspect of your society, even in the vulnerability of recovery. For the elite, the support system ensured a more graceful, perhaps less painful, return to sobriety, while for common revelers, the struggle was often a solo endeavour. It was a quiet reminder that while spiritual communion might momentarily blur social lines, the practical realities of recovery quickly re-established the hierarchy, emphasizing that even in shared experience, privilege found a way to assert itself. Beyond the hangover and the cleansing, your daily life was fundamentally defined by labour, and here too altered states played an astonishingly integrated role. Workers on massive state projects such as the construction of the pyramids, a feat of engineering you'd marvel at daily, were regularly paid in beer. Imagine receiving daily rations of several litres of that thick, chewable brew. This signifies that a significant portion of ancient Egyptian labour was quite literally fuelled by liquid gluten and mild intoxication. The lines between sustenance and a mild altered state were deeply blurred. The fatigue of manual labour, the relentless sun, the sheer physical grind of hauling stone or tilling fields, was often combated with this liquid bread. It wasn't just about calories, it was about softening the edges of hardship, making the grueling hours slightly more tolerable, acting as a pragmatic daily solution to the demands of your arduous responsibilities. The mild, intoxicating effects of your daily beer rations were in essence a pragmatic coping mechanism. Combine those effects with the extreme physical demands of labour in a harsh climate, the relentless sun, the back-breaking work in the fields, or at the quarry, the dust that settled into every pore, and you begin to understand. Substances, even mild ones, played a crucial role in numbing pain, boosting morale, or simply making long, arduous shifts more tolerable. It wasn't about seeking wild euphoria in the middle of a workday, but about taking the edge off, making the constant ache in your muscles a little less sharp, the monotony a little less soul-crushing. You might find yourself reaching for your beer not just for thirst, but for that familiar subtle shift in perception that allowed you to put one foot in front of the other, to lift that heavy basket one more time, to endure another hour under the unforgiving sun. It was a silent agreement between you and your labour, a small daily act of self-preservation in a life of toil. And while you toiled in the sun, the priestly elite had their own equally demanding form of labour. Imagine the sheer endurance required for their duties, chanting for hours on end, interpreting complex dreams, or staring into the swirling incense smoke until, as the saying went, something stared back. For these spiritual professionals, the use of substances like cannabis and Kyphi wasn't a leisure activity. It was integral to their professional responsibilities and performance. These were tools carefully administered to achieve a unique kind of endurance and mental fortitude. They needed to maintain altered states for extended periods, to open their minds to divine messages to guide the spiritual life of an entire civilization. You might observe a priest, eyes half closed, his voice, a drone understanding that he was engaged in a deep internal marathon, a demanding mental and spiritual performance, assisted by the very substances he might administer to others. His labour, though different from yours, was no less intense or vital to the cosmic order. Across society, from the labourer to the priest, the text implies that substances were routinely used by individuals to cope with the daily concerns that defined your world: desert heat, dangerous crocodiles, and public works projects. These weren't fleeting anxieties, they were pervasive, constant threats and demands. The ability to find comfort, relief, or a temporary mental escape was not just desired, but a daily necessity for mental resilience in the face of hardship. You would recognise this need in yourself, in your neighbours, in everyone around you. It highlights the pervasive role of altered states in navigating a difficult and unpredictable world, a silent, almost unspoken agreement that life was hard, and any small measure of relief, physical or psychological, was to be embraced. Perhaps the most astonishing testament to the integration of these practices with sheer productivity is the fact that somehow the pyramids still got built, despite workers being buzzed and breaded daily. Think about the scale of those projects. The precision required the coordination of thousands of individuals. It underscores an immense societal organisation, discipline and pressure for productivity even amidst widespread daily intoxication. It's an enduring testament to the collective will of your civilization, and perhaps the effectiveness of their chosen fuel. You lifted the stones, you pulled the ropes, your body fueled by beer, and your mind softened by its effects, yet the monumental structures rose inch by painstaking inch. This intricate dance between daily realities and pervasive altered states was, however, always underpinned by a rigid structure of power and control. As you reflect on the sheer willpower that built the pyramids, even with the constant hum of mild intoxication, it becomes clear that such a society required powerful mechanisms of control. And at the heart of much of this control lay the religious elite. You'd quickly understand that the priests didn't just interpret divine will, they held the keys to the sacred stash, managed the incense budget, and dictated the daily schedule of rituals. This granted them immense soft power, a subtle but pervasive influence that steered the emotional and mystical tone of society. They were effectively the gatekeepers of spiritual access, and by extension the collective societal mood. If they chose to increase the potency of the Kyphi, or to schedule a widespread trance-inducing festival, you would feel its ripple effect throughout your life. Their control over these essential substances and practices meant their influence permeated every layer of existence, often more profoundly than a direct command from a military leader. Even the pharaoh, the divine embodiment of Horus and the absolute ruler, was deeply intertwined with this subtle psychoactive governance. His dreams were considered state messages from the gods, not merely personal musings. This made the act of sedating his insomnia with a psychoactive nightcap not an indulgence, but a matter of national security. Think about it, a pharaoh disturbed by sleeplessness might misinterpret a divine message, or worse, receive no message at all, potentially jeopardizing the cosmic order. Thus ensuring his serene sleep and divinely guided dreams, often through carefully chosen substances, was paramount. It intertwined the very act of governance with the strategic use of altered states, making sure that perceived divine favour and stability flowed from the very top, from the sleeping mind of the king, subtly guided by the hands of his closest advisors. You'd understand that even the most powerful man in Egypt relied on these tools to maintain his connection to the divine for your benefit. This control extended to a clear hierarchy of access to the most potent substances. You'd witness firsthand the stark contrast. While the wealthy could afford the good stuff, the delicate blue lotus oil, the richly spiked pomegranate wine, imported cannabis, and even opium from distant lands, commoners like many of you received only watered-down versions of weaker beer and more basic incense. This wasn't just about luxury. It established a powerful tool for social control and privilege. It clearly defined who could truly get higher, both literally and metaphorically. The elite experienced profound, carefully crafted altered states, while the common folk received milder, more ubiquitous forms of intoxication. This differential access was a constant visual and experiential reinforcement of the immutable social hierarchy, defining not just what you ate or wore, but the very nature of your spiritual and recreational experiences. Furthermore, the temples themselves were far more than just religious sites. You'd recognize them as enormous landowners, employers, and massive centers of drug production. They weren't just places of worship. They were economic powerhouses orchestrating the cultivation, processing, and distribution of substances like blue lotus on a grand scale. This reinforced their economic and political dominance over society's spiritual and physical well-being. The vast fields of lotus, the vats of fermenting wine, the workshops blending incense, all under the temple's watchful eye. This centralized control meant that the very pathways to altered consciousness, whether for ritual medicine or mild recreation, flowed through the hands of the religious elite, further cementing their unyielding power in your daily existence. You've seen how temples dominated the production and distribution of these substances, wielding immense economic and spiritual power. This control also extended to a more abstract yet profoundly impactful realm, the control of information. Think about how often the query, "What did the high priest see in his trance last night?" would dominate over, say, "What's going on with the harvest?" This wasn't a frivolous preference. It underscored how priests, through their substance-induced visions, controlled crucial societal narratives and the official interpretations of events. If a crop failed or a military campaign faltered, it was the priest's trance that might reveal the god's displeasure or offer a path to appeasement. You'd wait often with bated breath for their pronouncements, understanding that these perceived divine insights shaped public perception, influenced policy, and often determined the course of action for the entire community. The divine word spoken through the veiled, altered mind of a priest held immense, almost unchallengeable authority, far outweighing mundane concerns. This pervasive power of the elite, particularly the religious class, didn't diminish even in death. You'd observe how even then they maintained their privilege. Their tombs weren't just repositories for their bodies. They were meticulously provisioned with medicinal vials, incense cones, and wine jars, a complete wellness kit for eternity. This wasn't merely a hopeful provision. It was an active assurance, ensuring their continued comfort and spiritual status in the underworld. It was a final, powerful expression of control over their posthumous experience, a clear statement that their elevated status would persist even beyond the veil of life. The journey into the afterlife for the elite was as carefully curated and privileged as their earthly existence, a continuation of their distinguished role in the cosmic order, ensuring they could remain in their own way, higher than others even among the dead. Indeed, the religious elite effectively functioned as state-sanctioned pharmacists. They were the trusted purveyors of a range of substances from calming ointments to full-blown psychedelic experiences disguised as Holy Communion. This demonstrates their direct institutionalized control over public health, spiritual experience, and crucially the maintenance of social order through regulated chemical means. If you needed relief from pain, you might consult a temple. If you sought spiritual insight, they would guide you with the appropriate substance. They were not just spiritual leaders, but the very administrators of your society's psychotropic landscape. You'd implicitly trust their expertise, understanding that their role was to provide the means for both physical comfort and divine connection, all within a carefully managed system that reinforced their authority. With such widespread integration of altered states, legal and enforcement mechanisms weren't always about outright prohibition, but about obligation and conformity. Take the Feast of Drunkenness, for example. It was a ritually sanctioned event where getting thoroughly obliterated wasn't just permitted, it was quite literally part of the job description. The societal norms strongly encouraged by the priests made not passing out during this ritual suspicious. Imagine the quiet glances, the unspoken judgment, if you were the one person still standing sober amidst the joyful, chaotic collapse. This acted as a powerful form of social coercion ensuring participation. You were expected to surrender, to engage fully, to embrace the divine trance. It wasn't enforced by chains or laws, but by the subtle yet potent pressure of community expectation and the desire to belong. You felt the subtle but powerful pressure to participate in the Feast of Drunkenness, and this pressure wasn't unique to large festivals. The pervasive communal nature of most rituals and shared experiences in your society, such as sharing communal jugs of beer from person to person, subtly created strong social pressure to participate fully. There were no explicit legal mandates forcing you to drink or engage in trance states in your daily life, but the feeling of belonging, of being truly part of the community, was intricately tied to these shared, often disinhibited experiences. If everyone around you was raising a cup, laughing and swaying, you would naturally feel compelled to join in. To hold back would be to set yourself apart, to subtly signal a detachment that might lead to exclusion. It was a powerful, unspoken contract to participate in the shared altered state, and you remain a part of the cohesive social fabric, reinforcing conformity through connection rather than outright command. However, the leniency for sanctioned revelry did not extend to unauthorized substance use, especially for the lower classes. Obtaining a forbidden substance without a permit was met with severe social and potentially legal consequences. This wasn't a minor infraction. It was often labelled as witchcraft heresy or a very bad day to be a field labourer. Imagine the fear of being caught with something deemed illicit outside of priestly sanction. The repercussions could be devastating, leading to ostracisation, punishment, or even worse, fates effectively ending your social and economic standing. This stringent control over illicit use highlighted the strict boundaries placed on altering one's state of consciousness, ensuring that such practices remained firmly within the purview of religious authority, and by extension reinforced the social hierarchy. Your access to altered states was as controlled as your access to land or wealth, serving as a constant reminder of your place. Even in the aftermath of sanctioned revelry, priestly authority reasserted itself. Post-hangover, ritual cleansing, as you might recall, was often accompanied by a stern lecture on moderation from a priest. This wasn't just fatherly advice. It suggested a system where religious authorities actively intervened to regulate behaviour and enforce societal expectations around substance consumption, even in recovery. They were there to guide you back physically and morally, reinforcing their moral and social control. You might listen with a pounding head, perhaps inwardly groaning, but outwardly showing respect, knowing that this was part of the unspoken contract. It was a subtle yet effective way to ensure that even widespread indulgence didn't lead to total anarchy or disrespect for the divine order. The priests were both facilitators and guardians, guiding your journey into altered states and back again. And finally, a powerful, subtle social enforcement mechanism was the cultural expectation for plausible deniability. Rather than admitting to mere overindulgence, you were culturally expected to attribute extreme intoxication to a divine encounter, or to being overcome by the divine. The morning after, when your head was throbbing and confusion lingered, you wouldn't admit to simply having too much beer. Oh no. You would recount a mystical encounter, a profound spiritual experience that left you physically disoriented. This preserved the sacred narrative, transforming personal lapses into stories of spiritual profundity and maintaining social decorum. The ache of a hangover became a badge of spiritual effort, a testament to your deep communion with the gods. It was a clever, almost theatrical way your society enforced its values, masking individual excess under a veil of piety, ensuring that the sacred remained sacred even when your sandals were leaving imprints on your face. You've witnessed the intricate dance of social control from mandated revelry to post-hangover lectures and the art of divine deniability. Now let's consider an even more profound aspect of societal control and the hierarchy it maintained, the shadow of death and honour. For the elite, death was not merely an end, it was a carefully managed continuation of their privileged existence. Imagine facing the underworld not with fear, but totally blissed out, thanks to opium or other potent substances administered as part of their final send-off. This ensured a serene and controlled transition fully in line with their status and the lofty social expectations placed upon them. It was a final act of privilege, a serene departure from the earthly realm, ensuring that their journey to eternity was as comfortable and divinely guided as their life had been. Even in the face of oblivion, power and control asserted themselves, providing a final luxurious comfort. This meticulous management of the elite's passage was reflected in the ritualized afterlife provisions. You'd observe the incredible detail elite tombs weren't just stocked with general items, but with specific substances: blue lotus, various wines, incense, along with instructions to the dead. This wasn't merely a gesture of love. It underscored a system where post-mortem rituals were a critical part of maintaining status and ensuring a controlled, comfortable afterlife journey. These provisions reflected honour in perpetuity, a declaration that their importance extended beyond the grave. The deceased elite were not simply buried. They were equipped, instructed, and sent forth with every conceivable tool to navigate the spiritual realm with grace and continued privilege. You might contemplate the immense effort and resources dedicated to this eternal preparation, recognizing it as a final powerful assertion of the elite's unyielding status. And to ensure the full utility of these posthumous provisions, a crucial ritual was performed, the opening of the mouth. This ritual for the deceased was believed to ritually enable them to eat, speak, and specifically to sip that sacred fermented beverage with proper technique. This wasn't just a symbolic act to restore senses, it served as a highly ritualized form of control. It ensured the soul's ability to fully utilize the provided afterlife resources, to consume the food, smell the incense, and of course partake in the sacred mind-altering drinks. By removing the limitations of death, this ritual guaranteed their active participation in the spiritual realm, thereby completing this cycle of honour and ensuring their continued engagement with the divine exactly as they had in life. Without this ritual, the lavish provisions might be for naught, thus highlighting its importance in securing a truly blessed eternity. This belief system underscored a profound cultural emphasis on honour in managing the transition to afterlife. The notion that pleasure from piety, even from psychoactive flowers and potent wines, belonged in the tomb alongside amulets and headrests spoke volumes. It wasn't a contradiction. It was a seamless integration of sensory experience and spiritual devotion. For the elite, this ensured a blissed-out and dignified transition intricately linked to their honour and societal standing. It effectively removed much of the fear of death, transforming it into a luxurious, comfortable journey towards perpetual comfort and continued spiritual connection. You'd understand that death for these privileged few was not an ending to be dreaded, but a continuation of comfort and pleasure, a promise of eternal bliss made tangible through carefully prepared provisions and rituals. This profound integration of substances into every stage of life and beyond, from the rituals of transition to the foundational structures of society itself, truly makes ancient Egypt a unique study. You've journeyed through the intricate ways altered states permeated everything from daily sustenance to the very rituals of death. But all these practices, all these personal realities were firmly anchored by the fundamental, unyielding structure of your society. At the absolute apex, a figure you understood not just as a king, but as the earthly embodiment of Horus himself was the pharaoh. Imagine the sheer weight of that responsibility, the divine mandate. Your pharaoh was tasked with nothing less than maintaining the cosmic order, ensuring balance and justice in a world that always teetered on the brink of chaos. He wasn't just a ruler, he was the ultimate standard for society, the focal point of divine connection, the living bridge between gods and humanity. His word was law, his presence sacred, and his very being set the tone for every aspect of your existence, from the grandest temple construction to the smallest agricultural cycle. You'd look upon his image or hear his decrees and feel the undeniable presence of an unchallengeable, divinely appointed authority whose influence shaped the world you inhabited in ways both seen and unseen. Directly beneath this divine ruler, yet wielding immense and often subtle influence, stood the priests. You've already learned of their control over sacred substances and rituals, but understand this by virtue of that exclusive control and their unique position as interpreters of divine will. They were the de facto power brokers. They acted as crucial intermediaries, translating the ethereal messages of the gods into tangible guidance for humanity. This wasn't power asserted through military might, but through soft power. The quiet authority that guided spiritual life explained omens and dictated the rhythm of sacred time. You'd consult them for blessings, for interpretations of dreams, for guidance on everything from a good harvest to a safe journey. Their words carried profound weight, shaping your understanding of the world and your place within it, solidifying their indispensable position within the social order, often more intimately connected to your daily decisions than the distant pharaoh. This rigid social hierarchy, which defined so much of your life, was vividly reinforced by a very tangible marker: substance access. Recall the stark contrast: high-grade, perhaps even imported opium for the elite, carefully administered for serene transitions or profound visions, delicate blue lotus oil for their rituals, potent spiked pomegranate wine for their banquets. And for commoners like you, the thick basic barley beer, perhaps a simpler, locally grown incense. This wasn't merely a difference in taste. It was a constant, undeniable visual and experiential reinforcement of the immutable social hierarchy. You could literally taste your place in society. The quality and nature of the altered states you could achieve, or were even permitted to pursue, were directly tied to your birthright and wealth. It wasn't just about who had more gold, but who could get higher in the most refined and potent ways. This difference permeated every layer of society, a constant, tangible reminder for all to see and experience, even in their most altered moments. This fundamental reality meant that for the vast majority, upward mobility was a rare, almost unheard of dream. You've seen the hierarchy from the divine pharaoh to the influential priests and understood how even access to altered states delineated your place. Now let's descend to the foundational level where most of you lived your lives, the fixed role of peasants and labourers. Picture yourself as one of these individuals, perhaps a pyramid worker or a farmer tilling the sun-baked soil near the Nile. Your existence was primarily defined by arduous physical work, a relentless cycle dictated by the seasons and the demands of the state. You'd wake with the sun, your body aching from yesterday's toil, knowing that another long day lay ahead. Your wages, as you've learned, were often tied to basic sustenance, particularly that thick, nourishing beer. It wasn't just a drink, it was currency calories and a mild comfort all rolled into one, signifying your fixed economic and social position. This reliance on beer as payment wasn't just a quirk of the system, it underscored your status. You weren't paid in precious metals or fine linens, you were paid in the very stuff that kept you alive and capable of working. It was a clear, unspoken contract, your labour for your sustenance, and that sustenance came with a gentle hum of intoxication to help you endure. Imagine the feeling in your calloused hands as you lifted the heavy baskets of mud brick, or pushed the massive stones, the fatigue slowly creeping into every muscle. The mild buzz from the beer was a constant companion, softening the edges of the physical pain, making the endless repetition just a little more bearable. You might find yourself sometimes envying the birds that flew freely overhead, unburdened by such tasks, but then you'd take another deep draught of beer, and the world would soften just enough to continue. This was your reality, a life of relentless physical effort fueled by liquid bread and a quiet acceptance of your lot. This brings us to a pervasive, almost undeniable truth of your ancient Egyptian life, a fixed destiny and profoundly limited mobility. The overall societal structure inherently conveyed this. Your birthright for the vast majority largely determined not only your material wealth and possessions or lack thereof, but also the very quality and nature of your spiritual and recreational experiences. If your father was a farmer, you were almost certainly a farmer. If he was a scribe, you had a chance, however slim, to follow in his footsteps. There was no grand illusion of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, in the way modern societies often romanticize. Upward mobility, the chance to transcend your station, was a rare, almost mythical occurrence, an exception that proved the rule. You learned early on to accept your place, to find contentment within the boundaries set by birth. This acceptance wasn't just about economic status, it extended to your inner world. The quality of your food, the comfort of your home, the potency of your spiritual experiences, all were predetermined. You wouldn't expect to sip imported opium or the finest blue lotus wine unless you were born into a family that could afford it, or served a temple that granted such access. This created a pervasive sense of limited upward mobility for the majority, a quiet understanding that your life's path was largely set before you took your first breath. It meant finding meaning and solace in the small everyday comforts, and the communal experiences that were available to you, rather than striving for a different, unattainable existence. Your dreams might be vast, but your waking reality was quite clearly defined, and you learned to live within those beautifully rigid lines, often finding your sense of self and belonging not in what you could become, but in what you already were and what you shared with your community. You've come to accept your place within the fixed social hierarchy, a reality often softened by the ubiquitous beer. But this grand system from the pharaoh down to your humble self was profoundly dependent on an intricate economy, at the heart of which lay an institution you might primarily associate with the divine, the temples. Beyond their undeniable spiritual role, the temples functioned as colossal economic powerhouses. Imagine them not just as places of solemn worship and ritual, but as sprawling, bustling enterprises, immense landholders whose estates stretched across fertile sections of the Nile Valley. They were major employers providing work for countless individuals like you, from farmers who tilled their vast fields to artisans who crafted their offerings. Think of the sheer scale. These weren't small local shrines, they were central hubs for drug production, a rather blunt modern term for what you'd consider the sacred cultivation of substances. The temples orchestrated the entire process, the meticulous cultivation of plants like the blue lotus in carefully irrigated gardens, the harvesting of its delicate petals, the precise drying processes, and the long, slow fermentation of ingredients for incense and specialized brews. This comprehensive operation wasn't a side venture, it formed a critical and deeply integrated part of the national economy and resource distribution. You might find yourself working on temple lands, aware that the crops you were tending or the herbs you were gathering were destined not just for sustenance, but for spiritual elevation, for medicine, and for the rituals that held your society together. This economic dominance meant the temples wielded power far beyond the spiritual realm. They were in essence major corporations of their time, controlling vast resources from seed to sacred smoke. Their coffers swelled not just from offerings, but from the immense output of their agricultural and production efforts. This allowed them to employ large numbers of people, influencing local economies and ensuring a steady flow of goods, including those mind-altering substances, throughout society. For you, working for a temple might mean a more stable existence, perhaps even a slightly better ration of beer, but it also meant your life was inextricably linked to their dictates, both sacred and economic. Their power was a tangible force shaping employment, trade, and the very availability of the substances that punctuated your daily and ritualistic life. You would see the boats laden with wine jugs and sacks of dried lotus petals heading down the Nile, all originating from temple lands, destined for distribution across various regions or for the pharaoh's court. This sophisticated network of production and distribution wasn't accidental. It was carefully managed to maintain the temple's influence and to ensure that the proper rituals could be observed, the sick could be treated, and the communal revelries could be fueled. It was a perfectly integrated system where spiritual authority and economic might reinforce each other, creating a stable, if rigidly controlled, flow of both physical and spiritual sustenance. The very fabric of your economic life was woven with the threads of sacred plants and priestly oversight, making the distinction between worldly goods and divine tools almost moot. You've witnessed the temple's economic might stretching its influence across vast lands and resources, but perhaps nothing illustrates the core economy more directly than the role of beer as a primary wage and staple commodity. Imagine yourself as a labourer on a colossal state project, perhaps helping to build a magnificent new temple, or maintaining the crucial irrigation canals that kept your crops alive. Your day would end not with a handful of coins, but with a distribution of several litres of that thick, nourishing beer. This wasn't a small perk. It was deeply integrated into the economic system, serving as a primary form of payment. You could literally feel your daily wages sloshing in the jug you carried home. This means that for countless individuals like you, beer wasn't just sustenance or a mild intoxicant. It was a fundamental commodity, a form of currency, and a major driver of daily consumption and economic activity. You'd use it trade, perhaps even save a portion for special occasions, though, given its perishable nature and your immediate caloric needs, most of it would be consumed swiftly. Think of the societal infrastructure built around this, the vast breweries, the skilled brewers, the systems for distribution and allocation. It underpinned a significant portion of your daily life, from the quiet hum of the production sites to the bustling energy of the distribution points. You might even find yourself contemplating the sheer volume of beer required to keep the entire nation functioning, a testament to its central economic role. This pervasive use of beer, made from emmer bread and wine derived from grapes, fundamentally highlights the agrarian nature of your economy. The very foundation of your society was the fertile strip of land bordering the Nile. Every sunrise you'd be reminded that the bounty of the land directly supported the widespread production and consumption of these key substances. The careful cultivation of emmer wheat, the tending of grapevines along the riverbanks, these were not just agricultural tasks, they were direct contributions to the spiritual and social fabric of your nation. The cycle of planting, growing and harvesting was inextricably linked to the ability to produce the beer that fueled your labour and the wine that lifted your spirits and connected you to the divine. You'd understand that a good harvest wasn't just about feeding mouths. It was about ensuring the continued flow of that liquid bread, that sacred wine. A poor harvest could mean not just hunger, but a disruption to wages, to rituals, to the very social rhythm of your community. The sun, the Nile's annual inundation, the fertility of the soil. These natural elements were not just forces of nature, but the ultimate providers of the ingredients for your altered states. It was a profound connection linking the practical realities of farming to the metaphysical experiences of your daily life. You might watch the young shoots sprout, feeling a quiet satisfaction, knowing that in time they would contribute to your sustenance, your wages, and perhaps even a gentle spiritual uplift, all thanks to the nourishing earth and the river's generosity. You've learned how the agrarian bounty of Egypt fueled your daily life, providing the ingredients for your ubiquitous beer and wine. But now shift your focus to the truly powerful psychoactive substances, those plants and preparations that could truly lift the veil between worlds or ease the most debilitating pain. These weren't simply grown in any field or freely brewed in any household. Oh no! The fact that these potent agents were often restricted to ritual or medical use, and meticulously aligned with the schedules of court officials and high priests, reveals a core truth about your society, a strict centralized control over these valuable and potent resources within the economic framework. Imagine the high priest with their air of quiet authority, not just tending to spiritual matters, but also maintaining meticulous inventories of precious ingredients. You'd see special storage rooms within the temple complexes, perhaps sealed and guarded, where dried mandrake roots, carefully prepared opium poppies, a non-native highly valued import, and the most potent blue lotus extracts were kept. These weren't commodities to be freely bought and sold in the marketplace. They were sacred assets, their distribution a matter of strategic importance. This system ensured that such powerful tools for altering consciousness were only ever used by those deemed worthy, those with the training and the spiritual authority to wield them. For you, a common labourer, the knowledge that such profound experiences existed yet were firmly beyond your grasp, without priestly intercession, was a constant, subtle reminder of your place. This wasn't just about limiting access, it was about ensuring strategic distribution. Think of it as a divine bureaucracy meticulously deciding who received what and when. If the pharaoh himself required a specific blend to calm his mind and ensure prophetic dreams, the finest quality would be dispensed. If a particularly important ritual demanded a powerful trance state for a high priestess, the most potent extract would be prepared, its potency measured with almost scientific precision. This centralized control underscored the intrinsic value placed on these substances not just for their effects, but for their symbolic power and their role in maintaining cosmic and social order. You'd never simply ask for a potent mandrake dose. It would be prescribed, administered, and overseen with a gravitas befitting its power. This contrast with the common everyday availability of beer is striking. Beer was for everyone a daily right, but a powerful psychoactive that was a privilege, a carefully guarded secret part of the sacred economy. You'd understand that the very act of a priest dispensing a small vial of a potent elixir was an exercise in power, a demonstration of their control over the hidden forces of nature and the pathways to the divine. The allocation of these resources wasn't left to chance. It was a deliberate top-down decision reflecting the intertwining of religious authority with economic and political control. It meant that even your internal experiences, your very perception of reality, were in a very real sense managed and guided by the ruling hierarchy. You might feel the weight of this control, a silent acknowledgement that your consciousness itself was part of the strategic resources of the state. This meticulous management also meant that the provenance of these valuable substances was closely monitored. Were they harvested from temple lands, or did they come from further afield? The answer to that question often pointed to another intricate layer of your economy, the reliance on external trade networks, weaving foreign lands into the very fabric of your spiritual practices. You've understood how the Nile's fertile banks provided the basic ingredients for your daily sustenance and mild intoxicants. Yet your society's appetite for deeper experiences, for more potent remedies, and for substances that carried truly profound spiritual weight, meant that you couldn't rely solely on what grew natively. This led to a crucial dependence on trade for exotic substances. Imagine the sight of foreign ships docking at bustling ports like Memphis or Thebes, or long caravans snaking across the desert from the east. Among their precious cargo were non-native substances, most notably the opium poppies from the eastern Mediterranean. These weren't just curious imports. They were vital integrating foreign economies deeply into the local fabric of your ritual medicine, and even the recreational practices of the elite. For you, a common Egyptian opium might have been a distant, almost mythical substance, glimpsed perhaps in the hands of a high priest, or whispered about in tales of the pharaoh's court. But for those in power, it was a prized possession, carefully cultivated and fiercely guarded. The trade routes that brought these poppies, often as dried sap or processed forms, were intricate and sometimes perilous. You'd hear stories of desert bandits, of treacherous seas, and of the long, slow journey across distant lands. These were not easy goods to acquire, and their rarity only enhanced their value and the prestige of those who could command them. Think of the merchants, both Egyptian and foreign, who navigated these complex networks, their lives often at stake to bring these specialized resources into your kingdom. Their negotiations, often in a cacophony of different languages and currencies, were essential to maintain the supply of such vital non-native goods. The integration of these foreign elements added layers of complexity to your resource management. It wasn't just about ensuring a good harvest from your own fields. It was about maintaining diplomatic ties with distant lands, securing safe passage for goods, and managing the economic implications of such imports. Opium, for instance, wasn't merely a recreational drug. It was a potent painkiller, a sedative, and a conduit for profound, often visionary experiences. For a pharaoh experiencing chronic pain, or for a priest seeking deeper communion with the gods, access to opium could be seen as indispensable. Its arrival from distant shores meant that your culture's understanding of medicine and spirituality was not insular, but deeply connected to a wider world, a testament to the ancient globalized economy. You might imagine a foreign ship, its hull heavy with exotic spices and bundles of dried poppies pulling into a busy dock. The air would be thick with the smell of salt distant lands and the excitement of new arrivals. This kind of trade meant that your rituals could draw upon a wider pharmacopoeia. Your medicine could address illnesses with more potent tools, and your elite could enjoy experiences unique to their status. It also underscored the fact that even in a seemingly self-sufficient civilization, there were desires and needs that necessitated looking beyond your own borders. This reliance on external networks for specialized resources wasn't just an economic detail. It was a testament to the human desire to push boundaries, to seek out new forms of relief, and to enhance spiritual connection, even if it meant venturing into unknown territories and dealing with foreign powers. And while human ingenuity could overcome many obstacles in trade, there were other more formidable challenges you faced daily, those that nature herself relentlessly threw at you. You've learned how far your civilization reached for exotic substances, weaving foreign lands into your tapestry of rituals and remedies. But while human ingenuity could overcome trade barriers, there were other more formidable challenges you faced daily, those that nature herself relentlessly threw at you. Imagine living with the constant pervasive struggles against a truly harsh environment. We're talking about desert heat, dangerous crocodiles and public works projects, a trifecta of daily discomfort and existential threat. You'd feel the sun not just warm, but a punishing, scorching force that seemed to bake the very air you breathed, making even simple tasks an exercise in endurance. Your skin would perpetually feel dry, your throat parched, and the sheer effort of existing under such relentless heat would drain your energy from the moment you woke. The Nile, your lifeblood, also brought dangers. Those dangerous crocodile problems were not just anecdotal. They were a very real and constant threat. Every trip to the river, every moment spent near its banks carried the unspoken possibility of a sudden brutal encounter. You learned caution, but vigilance was exhausting. And then the public works projects, the immense, unyielding demands of state labour day in and day out, whether building temples, irrigation systems or pyramids. This wasn't just physical exertion. It was a mental grind, an endless cycle of demanding tasks that left you weary to your bones. Against this backdrop of unrelenting physical toll and mental strain, a pervasive and deeply understandable need for comfort relief, or even just a temporary mental escape, arose. This wasn't about seeking wild, ecstatic visions every day, but about finding a way to soften the sharp edges of reality to make the unbearable a little more bearable. It's here that the readily available substances you've encountered, your daily beer, the mild intoxicants from local herbs, stepped in. They offered a necessary respite, a brief, gentle lifting of the weight. You'd find yourself reaching for your beer at the end of a long hot day, not just for thirst, but for the comforting hum it brought, that subtle blur that smoothed over the day's rough edges. This wasn't mere escapism in the modern sense. It was a pragmatic, almost routine form of self-medication. Your body ached, your mind was weary, and the world outside your mud brick home was relentlessly demanding. These substances in their various forms offered a quiet solace, alleviating the constant physical discomfort and easing the mental strain. You learned to value that mild buzz, that gentle float, that moment when the oppressive heat felt a little less suffocating and the crocodiles a little less terrifyingly real. It was a daily necessity, a quiet coping mechanism that allowed you to reset, if only for a few hours, before facing another sunrise and another day of the same challenges. This constant battle with the environment, however, also brought with it another pervasive threat: illness and pain, which further cemented the role of various substances in your world. You've spent your days contending with the sun and the perils of the river, but a more insidious, pervasive enemy also constantly threatened your well-being: systemic health threats. Imagine facing a world where plague, chronic pain and pyramid-related back injuries weren't just abstract possibilities but ever-present realities. You'd know of neighbours lost to swift, mysterious illnesses, of fellow labourers bent double with chronic pain from years of monumental work, their bodies slowly breaking under the immense physical demands. This contributed directly to the extensive use of substances like opium, mandrake and cannabis for medicinal relief. When a searing pain shot through your back, or a loved one suffered from a persistent ailment, there were no modern pharmacies or specialised doctors in the way you might conceive them. Your remedies came from nature, often powerful, and often involving a journey into altered states to find solace or healing. You might carefully chew a mandrake root to ease a throbbing toothache, or inhale cannabis smoke to dull the relentless ache of tired muscles, understanding that these were your best, perhaps only options for relief. This stark reality underscored the chronic health challenges faced by the general population and the glaring lack of anything resembling comprehensive modern medicine. You were largely your own physician, or relied on local herbalists and temple priests whose knowledge, while profound in its own way, was rooted in tradition and observation rather than scientific understanding. Every cough, every fever, every injury was a serious matter, a potential descent into debilitating suffering or even death. The reliance on plant-based medicines, many with psychoactive properties, wasn't a luxury. It was a desperate necessity, a constant attempt to alleviate suffering in a world where physical comfort was a rare and fleeting commodity. Perhaps one of the most fundamental environmental challenges, however, was the daily threat of unsafe water. You already know the Nile was your lifeblood, but you also understood its dangers. The prevalent danger of water that could kill you was very real. Without modern filtration or sanitation, the river water, while essential for agriculture and transport, was a constant source of waterborne diseases. This made fermented beer in its thick, chunky form a vital, safer alternative. Because it was boiled during its preparation and then fermented, many of the harmful pathogens were eliminated or rendered inert. This simple fact highlights a fundamental environmental challenge that profoundly shaped your daily consumption habits. Beer was elevated from a mere beverage to a necessity, a crucial daily choice for survival, that as a bonus offered a mild, comforting buzz. You drank it not just because it filled your stomach, but because it was the safer path, a small act of self-preservation in every mouthful. This widespread reliance on traditional remedies and self-medication through various plant-based substances, alongside descriptions of hangovers and physical purging, those lovely concoctions for evacuation, strongly implies a very limited, if any, formal or state-sponsored health and relief system for common ailments or post-revelry recovery. You wouldn't expect a public hospital or state-funded clinics. Instead, you managed your own health or sought help from trusted local healers, often through a system of barter or small offerings. The physical aftermath of communal intoxication, too, was largely a personal burden, or a shared familial one with perhaps a priest offering a ritual cleansing, but no organised medical care for your pounding head or aching muscles. This self-reliance in the face of illness and discomfort was another defining characteristic of your existence. Finally, your society's acceptance of environmental dangers was a constant, almost matter-of-fact part of life. The casual mention of dangerous crocodile problems as a daily concern wasn't hyperbole. It illustrated a society living in constant, intimate proximity to significant natural dangers. Beyond the large predators, the persistent buzz of insects in the stifling heat was another pervasive environmental stressor influencing daily life and the constant search for altered states. You learned to live with the scorpions, the snakes, the heat, and the unseen pathogens, understanding that nature was both provider and threat. This quiet acceptance likely contributed to the cultural embrace of coping mechanisms, including substances to navigate a world where true safety and comfort were often elusive. This continuous struggle against the elements and the profound ways your culture sought solace and meaning within it culminates in a powerful understanding of ancient Egyptian life. You've traversed the sun-baked landscapes and crowded temple courtyards, navigated the rigid social structures, and grappled with the relentless demands of nature. Now, as our journey through this ancient tapestry draws to a close, you can truly appreciate that in ancient Egypt the pursuit of being higher was not merely a fleeting indulgence, a casual pastime to escape the day's drudgery. Oh no! It was a deeply interwoven thread, an essential strand in the grand complex fabric of an entire civilization, impacting everything from your most basic daily survival to the profound quest for spiritual connection and an eternal blissful afterlife. Think back to the harsh realities of your daily life, the unrelenting desert heat, the ever-present danger of crocodiles, the sheer physical toll of public works projects. These weren't minor inconveniences. They were fundamental challenges that demanded constant resilience. Here, your thick, chewable beer wasn't just a drink. It was liquid bread, a vital source of calories, a safer alternative to the unreliable Nile water, and your daily wage. It was the pragmatic solution to a multitude of problems, a subtle companion that softened the edges of pain and monotony, allowing you to endure, to keep moving, to build those monumental structures that still stand today. You learn to value that mild buzz, that gentle cushioning against the rough edges of existence, not as a weakness, but as a necessary tool for survival. Then consider the intricate social order. Access to these potent substances, from the rich imported opium for the pharaoh to the humble barley beer for the labourer, clearly delineated your place in society, reinforcing the unyielding hierarchy. Yet within this structure, altered states also fostered a powerful sense of community. Remember the Feast of Drunkenness, where inhibitions dissolved and strangers collapsed together in shared chaotic communion, fulfilling a sacred obligation. The priest, those state-sanctioned pharmacists, controlled the sacred stash, managing the incense budget and steering the very emotional and mystical tone of society. Their visions, often induced by potent Kyphi smoke or cannabis, shaped policy and narrative, effectively controlling information and guiding your collective destiny. It was a system where pleasure and piety, privilege and obligation were inextricably linked, a testament to a society that understood the power of the mind and sought to harness it. And at the heart of it all lay your profound spiritual connection. The blue lotus with its elegant petals was not just a flower, it was a symbol of rebirth, a direct path to inhaling divinity. Kyphi, the spiritual elevator, filled temple chambers with its heavy, sweet smoke-inducing visions and a sense of deep spirituality. Mandrake offered both healing and terrifying power, a direct link to nature's potent mysteries. These substances weren't just means to an end. They were integral to your communion with the gods' pathways to understanding the cosmic order. Even in death, this pursuit continued. Your tombs were meticulously provisioned with blue lotus wine and incense, ensuring a continuous spiritual journey, a blissed-out transition to an eternal afterlife. The opening of the mouth ritual ensured you could still sip that sacred fermented beverage, removing the limitations of death and allowing your soul to fully participate in the divine. This unique philosophy, where pleasure was not separated from piety, meant that if a psychoactive flower soaked in wine brought you closer to the gods in life, it was deemed equally appropriate, even essential for your journey into eternity. You lived in a world where the sensory experience was a direct route to spiritual devotion, a holistic embrace of existence. So as you let these ancient whispers fade, recognize that the Egyptians' quest for being higher wasn't an escape from their reality, but rather a deeply ingrained, ingenious and fundamentally human way of engaging with it, shaping their survival, their society and their eternal aspirations. As the echoes of ancient Egypt gently recede, allow your mind to drift from the sun-drenched sands and the distant hum of daily life. The sounds of rhythmic chanting and the sweet scent of Kyphi incense now fade, replaced by the quiet comfort of your own surroundings. You've glimpsed a world where the search for meaning and solace often led to unexpected pathways, where the mundane and the mystical were interwoven threads in a grand design. Contrast the relentless heat and the constant struggles of ancient times with the quiet stillness of your present moment. The urgent concerns of pharaohs and priests of harvests and crocodiles now settle into the distant past. Let any lingering thoughts of ancient challenges dissipate like the morning mist over the Nile. Your journey through history is complete for tonight, And as your eyelids grow heavy, you can find peace in the knowledge that you're safe, warm, and utterly free from pyramid-related back injuries. So breathe deeply, let your muscles soften, and allow yourself to sink into a calm, restful sleep.